Carlos Castaneda's The Teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui Way of Knowledge. Part 1, The Teachings, Chapter 9. Don Juan seemed to want me to work with the devil's weed as much as possible. This stand was incongruous with my alleged dislike of the power. He explained himself by saying that the time when I had to smoke again was near, and by then I ought to have developed a better knowledge of the power of the devil's weed. He suggested repeatedly that I should at least test the devil's weed with one more sorcery with the lizards. I played with the idea for a long time. Don Juan's urgency increased dramatically until I felt obliged to heed his demand. And one day I made up my mind to divine about some stolen objects. On Saturday, December 19th, I cut the datura root. I waited until it was fairly dark to do my dancing around the plant. I prepared the root extract during the night, and on Sunday, about 6 a.m., I went to the site of my datura. I sat in front of the plant. I had taken careful notes on Don Juan's teachings about the procedure. I read my notes again, and I realized I did not have to grind the seeds here. Somehow, just being in front of the plant gave me a rare kind of emotional stability, a clarity of thought, or a power to concentrate on my actions, which I ordinarily lacked. I followed all the instructions meticulously, calculating my time so that the paste and the root were ready by late afternoon. About 5 o'clock I was busy trying to catch a pair of lizards. For an hour and a half I tried every method I could think of, but I failed in every attempt. I was sitting in front of the datura plant trying to figure out an expedient way of accomplishing my purpose when I suddenly remembered that Don Juan had said the lizards had to be talked to. At first I felt ludicrous talking to the lizards. It was like being embarrassed by talking in front of an audience. The feeling soon vanished and I went on talking. It was almost dark. I lifted a rock. A lizard was under it. It had the appearance of being numb. I picked it up, and then I saw there was another stiff lizard under another rock. They did not even wriggle. The sewing of the mouth and the eyes was the most difficult task. I noticed that Don Juan had imparted a sense of irrevocability to my acts. His stand was that when a man begins an act, there is no way to stop. If I had wanted to stop, however, there was nothing to prevent me. Perhaps I did not want to stop. I set one lizard free, and I went in a northeasterly direction. It went in the northeasterly direction, the omen of a good but difficult experience. I tied the other lizard to my shoulder and smeared my temples as prescribed. The lizard was stiff. For a moment I thought it had died, and Don Juan had never told me what to do if that had happened. But the lizard was only numb. I drank the potion and waited a while. I felt nothing out of the ordinary. I began rubbing the paste on my temples. I applied it 25 times. Then, quite mechanically, as if I were absent-minded, I spread it repeatedly all over my forehead. I realized my mistake and hurriedly wiped the paste off. My forehead was sweaty. I became feverish. Intense anxiety gripped me, for Don Juan had strongly advised me not to rub the paste on my forehead. The fear changed into a feeling of absolute loneliness, a feeling of being doomed. I was there by myself. If something harmful was going to happen to me, there was no one there to help me. I wanted to run away. I had an alarming sensation of indecision, of not knowing what to do. A flood of thoughts rushed into my mind, flashing with extraordinary speed. I noticed that they were rather strange thoughts, that is. They were strange in the sense that they seemed to come in a different way from ordinary thoughts. I am familiar with the way I think. My thoughts have a definite order that is my own, and any deviation is noticeable. One of the alien thoughts was about a statement made by an author. It was, I vaguely remember, more like a voice, or something said somewhere in the background. It happened so fast that it startled me. I paused to consider it, but it changed into an ordinary thought. I was certain I had read the statement, but I could not think of the author's name. I suddenly remembered that it was Alfred Kroeber. Then another alien thought popped up and said that it was not Kroeber, but that it was Org Simmel who had made the statement. I insisted that it was Kroeber, and the next thing I knew, I was in the midst of an argument with myself and had forgotten about my feeling of being doomed. My eyelids were heavy, as though I had taken sleeping pills, although I have never taken any. It was the image that came to my mind. I was falling asleep. I wanted to go to my car and crawl in, but I couldn't move. Then, quite suddenly, I woke up, or rather, I clearly felt that I had. My first thought was about the time of day. I looked around. I was not in front of the Datura plant. Nonchalantly, I accepted the fact that I was undergoing another divinatory experience. It was 12:35 by a clock above my head. I knew it was afternoon. I saw a young man carrying a stack of papers. It was nearly touching him. I saw the veins of his neck pulsating and heard the fast beating of his heart. I had become absorbed in what I was seeing and had not been aware so far of the quality of my thoughts. Then I heard a voice in my ear describing the scene. I realized that the voice was the alien thought in my mind. I became so engrossed in listening that the scene lost its visual interest in me. I heard the voice at my right ear, above my shoulder. It actually created the scene by describing it, but it obeyed my will because I could stop it at any time and examine the details of what it had said at my leisure. I heard/saw the entire sequence of the young man's action. That's good. Okay, what was I? The entire sequence of the young man's action. The voice went on explaining them in minute detail, but somehow the action was not important. The little voice was the extraordinary issue. 3 times during the course of the experience, I tried to turn around to see who was talking. I tried to turn my head all the way to the right, or just to whirl around unexpectedly to see if somebody was there. But every time I did it, my vision became blurry. I thought, the reason I cannot turn around is because the scene is not in the realm of ordinary reality, and that thought was my own. From then on, I concentrated my attention on the voice alone. It seemed to come from my shoulder. It was perfectly clear, although it was a small voice. It was, however, not a child's voice or a falsetto voice, but a miniature man's voice. It wasn't my voice either. I presumed it was English that I heard. Whenever I tried to deliberately to trap the voice, it subsided altogether or became vague and the scene faded. I thought of a simile. The voice was like the image created by the dust particles in the eyelashes or the blood vessels in the corona of the eye, a worm-like shape that can be seen as long as no one is looking at it directly. But the moment one tries to look at it, it shifts out of sight with the movement of the eyeball. I became totally disinterested in the action as I listened to the voice become more complex. What I thought to be a voice was more like something whispering thoughts into my ear. But that was not accurate. Something was thinking for me. The thoughts were outside myself. I knew that was so because I could hold my own thoughts and the thoughts of the other at the same time. At one point, the voice created scenes acted out by the young man, which had nothing to do with my original question about the lost objects. The young man performed very complex acts. The action became important again, and I paid no more attention to the voice. I began to lose patience. I wanted to stop. How can I end this, I thought. The voice in my ear said I should go back to the canyon. I asked how, and the voice answered that I should think of my plant. I thought of my plant. I usually sat in front of it. I had done it so many times that it was quite easy for me to visualize it. I believe that seeing it as I did at that moment was another hallucination. But the voice said I was back. I strained to listen. There was only silence. The datura plant in front of me seemed as real as everything else I had seen, but I could touch it. I could move around. I stood up and walked toward my car. The effort exhausted me. I sat down and closed my eyes. I felt dizzy and wanted to vomit. There was a buzzing in my ears. Something slid on my chest. It was the lizard. I remembered Don Juan's admonition about setting it free. I went back to the plant and untied the lizard. I did not want to see whether it was dead or alive. I broke the clay pot with the paste and kicked some dirt over it. I got into my car and fell asleep. Thursday, December 24th, 1964. Today I narrated my whole experience to Don Juan. As usual, he listened without interrupting me. At the end, we had the following dialogue. You did something very wrong. I know it. It was very stupid error, an accident. There are no accidents when you deal with the devil's weed. I told you, she would test you all the way. As I see it, either you are very strong or the weed really likes you. The center of the forehead is only for the great brujos who know how to handle her power. What usually happens when a man rubs his forehead with the paste on Juan? If a man is not a great brujo, he will never come back from the journey. Have you ever rubbed the paste on your forehead, Don Juan? Never. My benefactor told me very few people return from such a journey. A man could be gone for months and would have to be tended by others. My benefactor said the lizards could take a man to the end of the world and show him the most marvelous secrets upon request. Do you know anybody who has ever taken that journey? Yes, my benefactor. But he never taught me how to return. Is it so very difficult to return, Don Juan? Yes, that is why your act is truly astonishing to me. You had no steps to follow, and we must follow certain steps, because it is in the steps where man finds strength. Without them, we are nothing. We remained silent for hours. We seemed to be immersed in a very deep deliberation. Saturday, December 26, 1964. Don Juan asked me if I had looked for the lizards. I told him I had, but that I couldn't find them. I asked him what would have happened if one of the lizards had died while I was holding it. He said the death of a lizard would be an unfortunate event. If the lizard with the sewed-up mouth had died at any time, there would have been no sense in pursuing the sorcery, he said. It would have also meant that the lizards had to withdraw their friendship, and I would have to give up learning about the devil's weed for a long time. How long, Don Juan? I asked. 2 years or more. What would have happened if the other lizard had died? If the second lizard had died, you would have been in real danger. You would have been alone without a guide. If she died before you started your sorcery, you could have stopped it. But if you had stopped it, you would have to give up the devil's weed for good. If the lizard had died while she was on your shoulder after you had begun the sorcery, you would have had to go ahead with it, and that would truly have been madness. Why would it have been madness? Because under such conditions, nothing makes sense. You're alone without a guide, seeing terrifying, nonsensical things. What do you mean by nonsensical things? Things we see by ourselves, things we see when we have no direction. It means the devil's weed is trying to get rid of you, finally pushing you away. Do you know anyone who ever experienced that? Yes, I did. Without the wisdoms of the wizards, I went mad. What did you see, Don Juan? A bunch of nonsense. What else could I have seen without direction? Monday, December 28th, 1964. You told me, Don Juan, that the devil's weed tests men. What do you mean by that? The devil's weed is like a woman, and like a woman she flatters men. She sets traps for them at every turn. She did it to you when she forced you to rub the paste on your forehead. She will try it again, and you will probably fall for it. I warn you against it. Don't take her with passion. The devil's weed is only one path to the secrets of a man of knowledge. There are other paths, but her trap is to make you believe that hers is the only way. I say it is useless to waste your life on one path, especially if that path has no heart. But how do you know when a path has no heart, Don Juan? Before you embark on it, you ask the question, does this path have a heart? If the answer is no, you will know it, and then you must choose another path. But how will I know for sure whether a path has heart or not? Anybody would know that. The trouble is nobody asks the question. And when a man finally realizes that he has taken a path without a heart, the path is ready to kill him. And at that point, very few men can stop to deliberate and leave the path. How should I proceed to ask the question properly, Don Juan? Just ask it. I mean, is there a proper method so I would not lie to myself and believe the answer is yes, when it is really no? Why would you lie? Perhaps because at the moment the path is pleasant and enjoyable. That is nonsense. A path without a heart is never enjoyable. You have to work hard even to take it. On the other hand, a path with heart is easy. It does not make you work at liking it. Don Juan suddenly changed the direction of the conversation and bluntly confronted me with the idea that I liked the devil's weed. I had to admit that I had at least a preference for it. He asked me how I felt about his ally, the smoke, and I had to tell him that just the idea of it frightened me out of my senses. I have told you that to choose a path, you must be free from fear and ambition. But the smoke blinds you with fear, and the devil's weed blinds you with ambition. I argued that one needs ambition even to embark on any path, and that his statement that one had to be free from ambition did not make sense. A person has to have ambition in order to learn. To desire to learn is not ambition, he said. It is our lot as men to want to know. But to seek the devil's weed is to bid for power, and that is ambition, because you are not bidding to know. Don't let the devil's weed blind you. She has hooked you already. She entices men and gives them a sense of power. She makes them feel that she can do things that no ordinary man can. But that is her trap, and the next thing, the path without a heart, will turn against men and destroy them. It does not take much to die, and to seek death is to seek nothing. End of chapter.